all the politicians from all parties gathered there and cheering Volodymyr Zelensky, applauding him. It's a sign that this is an area where there is a lot of agreement across parties. He's not going to face problems from the opposition in getting further support for Ukraine, as you heard there from Keir Starmer.
Volodymyr Zelensky is now going to meet European leaders in Brussels today, having taken his request for fighter jets first to us, then to France and Germany last night. He really is continuing his campaign for military support. Well, how did yesterday's historic meeting go down and what will its impact be? Political correspondent Terry Stiastny joins us now. Terry, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Rosie.
He really was trying to channel Churchill. It was a very emotive, significant speech. What stood out to you?
Well, I think overall, just the sheer drama of the scene of watching Volodymyr Zelensky stand there in Westminster Hall, which is, such a historic place, the oldest part of the Houses of Parliament, and his appeal to history, as you were saying, talking about how he'd, on his last visit to the UK, been to the Cabinet War Rooms, sat in the chair that Churchill had sat in, and some of those flourishes. I mean, you just heard there the moment where he gave that Air Force helmet to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, talking about wings for freedom. I mean, you could tell this is someone, who trained as an actor, who used to be an actor, and how he was really appealing to history and to the international values of the moment and the reception that he got, as well as then going on to speak to Ukrainian troops who are already training in Britain and making clear this request for more international support, including, of course, the importance of planes.
So what's the sort of process at play here? Because Rishi Sunak's now asked the Defence Secretary to investigate what jets the UK could potentially give. Is there any sense that Zelensky could get exactly what he's asking for?
Well, I think if we look at, the requests that he has made in the past, eventually he has often got what he has asked for. I mean, we've seen over the past year how international support has increased. Most recently, we've seen the decision to give tanks. That's taken quite a long time. But there are difficulties with some of this, not least the cost and not least the amount of time that it takes to get Ukrainian troops properly trained to be able to fly the kinds of jets that Volodymyr Zelensky has been asking for.
So what are the different kind of pressures on the Prime Minister in deciding how much support to give?
Well, there are quite a lot of different pressures here. So, firstly, of course, there's the question of resources. There's how much do we have? How much can the Ministry of Defence afford to give? This is expensive kit. This is expensive stuff. As Rishi Sunak was saying yesterday, there is the issue of training the pilots to fly the jets. Sometimes that can take up to 3 years, though Zelensky was saying, well, look, some of the fighters are already training, some of them have done some of this training already. And then, of course, there's the issue of what the other allies will support. So, of course, Zelensky went on yesterday to have talks with President Macron and Olaf Scholz in Paris. He's going on to Brussels. So, will people be in agreement across the rest of Europe as to what support they should give? He's asking for other things as well, support against drones, support in terms of long-range missiles. So, it will inevitably be a process of negotiation.
Should we just very briefly pause and have a listen to the response and the reaction yesterday that was given by Sir Keir Starmer? This is what he had to say. I think we can just hear from Keir Starmer. No, we can't. We'll get the clip in just a second.
Wherever the government has taken action, whether it's arms, whether it's training, and I've seen some of the training down in Salisbury myself, we have supported that. I think as we go forward, it's got to be a united front with NATO, and I think it's very important we're in lockstep with NATO, and those discussions need, obviously, to continue, but everything the government's done so far, we've supported.
This is something that has fostered a new sense of unity. The challenge is, though, this is still very politically sensitive for Rishi Sunak. Yesterday, Zelensky thanked Boris Johnson passionately and said, look, thank you so much for your support, because, well, obviously, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister at the time, but it does become more tricky for Rishi Sunak, doesn't it?
Well, I think looking yesterday at Westminster Hall and seeing all the politicians from all parties gathered there and cheering Volodymyr Zelensky, applauding him, it's a sign that this is an area where there is a lot of agreement across parties. He's not going to face problems from the opposition in getting further support for Ukraine, as you heard there from Keir Starmer. I mean, yes, Boris Johnson was singled out for a mention there, and he's been on visits to Ukraine recently, but I don't think he's not going that much further. There's not really a substantial disagreement there. Yes, he's likely to be pushing for further support, and you saw Boris Johnson sort of nodding in agreement with these requests for Ukraine for the support. But I think it's a question of degree. So it's not a big violent disagreement here between the parties or within the parties. It's just a question of how far we can go and how quickly.
Just finally, Terry, the cartoon in the Times today is a picture of Boris Johnson out in front with a shield that has Zelensky on it. And then Rishi Sunak is stood behind with a slightly smaller shield of Zelensky as well. And Boris Johnson saying, "Oi, he was my human shield first." To what extent, actually, does this support for Ukraine and support for Zelensky help the Prime Minister in? It does provide a shield because, as we've just described there, it's very difficult for anyone to oppose anything the government are doing.
Yes, and as we're talking now about the drama of yesterday's big moment in Parliament. We're not so much talking about the reshuffle or the strikes or the other issues that, of course, that are still going on for Rishi Sunak. Of course, it is easier for Boris Johnson to be pushing things further now because he's not the person that ultimately has to make the decisions to find the money and to do all of the hard parts of the job. So yes, there is an element where everyone can unite around this and find an area of agreement, which of course does help Rishi Sunak. But the difficult part comes afterwards, after the distinguished visitors have moved on and gone home.
Precisely. Terry Stiastny, thank you very much for your analysis this morning. Political correspondent there, talking us through lots of the different dynamics at play.